I used to think hope was a quiet thing. You light it like a candle, set it where the drafts can't get to it, and tend it while the rest of your life goes on. Groceries, group chats, Tuesday garbage. Turns out hope can be loud, like an engine you push too hard because the hill looks shorter from the bottom. I'm Marcus. 35. Security engineer at a hospital system in Boston, which basically means I'm paid to make sure the bad guys can't talk machines into believing they're doctors. My wife Nora is a brand strategist who can sell you a shampoo with a sentence and make you feel like you're buying a philosophy. We met at Trillium on a Friday when the city smelled like wet stone. She asked if she could share my table because her friends were late, then never stopped sharing my life because I was early for once. We did the things. Winter walks on the Esplanade that made us forgive February. A Brookline rental with a kitchen that believed in mornings. A shepherd mix we named Ivy because she climbed into places she didn't belong and made them prettier. We got married at the Lars Anderson Park boathouse and danced under a tent that made my mother cry because the lights looked like a sky that had decided to be kind. Kids were part of the plan, the way retirement is. A someday we said out loud because otherwise the word felt fragile. We tried like people in commercials, tried like adults with apps, tried like two people who thought you graduate into the next stage of life by performing competence at the current one. After a year of smiling through late periods that weren't late enough, I booked a consult at Charles View Fertility on Longwood because my job has taught me to call experts before you break more than you can fix. Unexplained infertility is a diagnosis that feels like a shrug and a lab coat. Nora's numbers, fine. My numbers, fine. The doctor, Sud, soft voice, a wall of diplomas, said the sentences I knew he would, timed intercourse, IUI, IVF. We left with a packet that made our kitchen table look like we were applying for a visa to a country no one warns you, charges, taxes, and hope. IUIs first. Science plus romance plus the particular humiliation of ejaculating into a cup in a bathroom with a poster that says, breathe. We did 2 rounds. I feel like a weird carnival game, Nora joked after the second one, leaning into me in the elevator while holding the little appointment card like a ticket. We were still laughing then. I bought her a pastry from Tat because people who eat sugar in daylight are less likely to cry in the bathroom at night. It didn't work. Unlucky, Dr. Sud said gently. IVF sounded like bringing artillery to a snowball fight. Nora did the shots with grim grace. I mixed meds like a bartender with anxiety. Our fridge became science. Our trash became biohazard. We whispered to follicles like they were seeds. It worked a little and didn't. They retrieved 6 eggs, fertilized 4, watched 2 begin, and then called us on a Thursday with the tone clinics have perfected, compassionate, distant. No viable embryos on day 5, a nurse said. We can regroup. I watched the muscles in Nora's jaw calculate between anger and grief and land on a smile because she never lets strangers see her with bad lighting. Can we do 1 month where my body isn't a spreadsheet, she asked that night, forehead on my shoulder. Just be normal, no shots. I want to feel like a person again. Whatever you need, I said, and meant it. We took a break. We went to Provincetown and pretended the ocean was medicine. We slept late. We drank coffee on a porch that had its own opinion about weather. We even had sex like 2 people who might not be calculating anything. The air felt lighter. I went to San Jose for a week because my job thinks the best way to solve security at hospitals is to make cryptographers speak in complete sentences to people who still use pagers. I brought her back a stupid t-shirt with a bear on it, and she wore it while making eggs the next morning and looked at me like we weren't out of time. A week after I got back, she stood in the bathroom holding a stick like it was a relic and said, "It's positive," in a voice I think children use when they find a rope in the dark and hope it's not a snake. I took the stick and stared at the word pregnant, the way you stare at a word you've written so many times it becomes abstract. Then I laughed, and then I cried, and then I knelt on our disgusting bath mat and put my forehead to her stomach like a cliché. We did it, I said into her skin, like the verb itself could calibrate fate. We called our parents. We said the phrase, tiny blueberry, because an app told us that's what a baby is at 5 weeks. We scheduled a first ultrasound. Nora texted me while I was at work. They want labs tomorrow morning. HCG, progesterone, also need insurance info again. Bleh. I sent back a bicep emoji because men don't know what to do with blood except flex at it, and then I opened our insurer portal at my desk because I am the kind of man who checks explanation of benefits the way other people check weather. That's where I saw it, a claim dated 3 weeks earlier for a therapeutic donor insemination consult. CPT code 50322, another for sperm wash and prep donor, another for cryobank storage fee. The clinic name matched Charlesview, the subscriber Nora. The plan had applied our deductible and a coinsurance. The tiny EOB notes my brain catalogs as a hobby read, no spousal authorization on file, patient attests single for donor use. I told myself a story immediately because that is what brains do when they need to not die before lunch. Insurance mistake. Data entry error. Some clerk clicked the wrong drop-down. A bad batch sent to the wrong member ID. I took a screenshot, redacted nothing, and emailed the member services address with a subject that was almost petulant. Wrong claims on my account. Please remove. I got the auto reply. I printed the screenshot and put it in a folder anyway because I am the kind of man who accepts that bureaucracies are lazy organisms and sometimes you need to show them their own face. At dinner, I brought it up gently because gentle is the only tone available when a miracle is the only thing in the room. Weird EOBs came today, I said. Billings for donor prep. Must be a mistake. I sent a note. She didn't look up from the salad she was coaxing into believing it wasn't just leaves. Insurance is a very funny species, she said. Remember when they billed us twice for the same ultrasound? They billed us for an ultrasound we didn't have, I said, and let the sentence end there because letting it continue would have been asking too much of the night. The lab requisition printed while we were brushing our teeth like a polite ghost. Pick up at 7:40, it said at the top. Fasting not required. Under ordering provider, not sued, but a PA's name I didn't recognize. Under diagnosis, pregnancy AMA. Under comments, a line I had never seen on any of our fertility paperwork. Patient requests confidentiality, no external portal proxy notifications. I'd set up proxy access to Nora's portal during the IVF months because she hates logins. It's a household thing, like who's allowed to move the laundry at the half hour. Must be a default, she said when I showed her. Clicky office people love boxes. Friday morning, I sat in the car at Longwood while she went in for bloods and tried to teach my nervous system to believe in joy like it wasn't a tripwire. A nurse came to my window with a receipt because this is America. She smiled and said, "Congratulations, Dad," kindly, the way anesthesia nurses do, and my heart did the thing where it tries to leap up and bite your throat from the inside because evolution never met a billing cycle. I wanted to accept the version where fate owed us one and decided to pay up the week I learned the word Day 5 arrest. I wanted to live in the montage the apps sell, the one with olives and books and a sonogram held to the light. But I also pay my mortgage by assuming smart people will lie to computers if it benefits them. The EOB did not look like a lie. It looked like an audit trail. The first real crack didn't scream. It pinged. Our carrier sent a text at 8:03 p.m. Thursday, two-factor authentication setup complete for number ending 7721. I didn't set up anything. Nora was in the tub listening to a podcast with her eyes closed, one hand on her stomach like she was holding a story in place. I sat on the edge of the bed and logged into the portal from my phone to see what had changed. The contacts section had my email replaced with a new one that had a period in my name I don't use. The preferred phone matched my number. The proxy access box for me was unchecked. That is a reasonable choice. A person gets pregnant and decides to have control over her own medical information. I would have applauded it if it came with a sentence. It came with quiet. Saturday, an envelope arrived from the clinic that looked like a catalog but felt like a secret. I opened it because I opened the mail in our house, and because you cannot call me controlling if you consider rent an act of faith. Inside, a brochure for Charlesview donor services, glossy. Men smiling like they had solved something with genetics. Family building options for diverse families, the copy said, and I agree with that as a sentence. Tucked into the brochure was a payment stub for a 6-month cryobank storage fee with our address and a patient number and a due date circled in pink highlighter. A sticky note on the front in someone's office cursive, "As requested, self-pay invoices by mail, not portal. Congrats again." I put the brochure back in the envelope like it was a bomb I had to keep at room temperature. Then I took my folder out of the cabinet and added the envelope to the screenshots. It was 3 pages. It felt like a crime already. Timing in stories like this always matters in the retelling. People want to know where you were and what day it was because they want to measure themselves against the you of that moment and tell themselves they would have been braver. I was in my kitchen in sweatpants on a Sunday morning when I decided to stop importing hope and start exporting control. I opened a new doc. I named it nouns. I made 3 columns: what I know, what I can prove, what I can only feel. What I know, we had an IVF cycle that failed 2 weeks before I left for San Jose. We did not do another. We did not do IUI. Nora had blood work and a positive urine test on my return. An EOB showed donor services at our clinic 3 weeks earlier. The clinic had mailed donor brochures and a storage invoice. Nora's portal now had proxy access removed. What I can prove, the EOBs, the envelope, the portal history, I had screenshots from before, thank you passed me, the carrier's text about 2-factor. What I can only feel, she wanted this so bad she might do anything. She looked at herself in the mirror differently after the IVF failed. She started keeping her phone flat on the table like it was a nervous pet. Monday, I called the clinic compliance office because that is what men like me do when something smells like paperwork pretending to be air. A woman named Kelsey answered with the voice of someone who makes problems smaller for a living. I told her there might be errors on my insurance. I asked her to confirm whether a donor prep and TDI consult were billed under my wife's MRN while we were on a break. She went quiet in that way. That means typing. I can't speak to any of your spouse's care without her consent, she said after a beat. If you believe there's an error, you can fax our release form and your question. Fax. The year was 2025. I printed the form, filled it with every number I own, and wrote, in neat calm, that I was asking for a list of all dates of service and procedures billed in the past 60 days, with specific clarification as to whether donor gametes were used or prepared, and, if so, whether spousal consent was on file as required by Massachusetts law for married patients. I added that last bit because my job has taught me that people who break rules count on you not knowing there are rules. I faxed it from my office because I still go into buildings and pretend the world is sane. Then I went home and kissed my wife's neck while she made pasta and wanted to tell her a dumb story about our fax machine jamming like it's still 1998. Instead, I asked what she wanted to do about nursery paint colors because there is no version where I make the baby's room an evidence locker. Tuesday morning, a letter arrived from Charlesview addressed to me, not Nora. That alone sent a chill across the floor. Inside, 2 sentences typed like they believed they were putting a genie back in a bottle. Dear Mr. Klein, we received your request for information regarding your spouse's care. Under Massachusetts law and our policy, we cannot disclose any information about donor use without the patient's consent. We can confirm that no services have been billed under your insurance erroneously. If you have questions, please have your spouse contact us. I read it 3 times because it said nothing and everything. Your insurance is correct. We are not going to tell you why. Have her call. The weasel word was donor use. The law says spousal consent is required for the use of donor gametes in assisted reproduction for married people. The clinic was telling me with lawyerly politeness that if a donor was used here, they had a document with my name on it, or a story about why they didn't need it. I knew I hadn't signed anything, so the story had to be better than me. At lunch, I walked to a coffee shop on Huntington and pulled up our insurer portal again because masochism is a habit dressed in diligence. New EOBs had posted HCG quantitative X2, progesterone, prenatal panel. Fine. Another, new patient consult, reproductive psychiatry. Nora hadn't mentioned that. The provider's note title was visible. Counseling disclosure decisions for donor-conceived child. I swallowed half my coffee wrong and coughed so hard a woman offered me a napkin. I took it because sometimes strangers save you while you do math in a public place. That night, Nora curled into me on the couch under a blanket that has seen 6 winters and 3 fights and 1 dog surgery and said, "I'm so tired, it feels like I'm made of jelly." "Growing a person," I said, and kissed her hair. "You want me to go to the scan alone tomorrow?" she asked, almost casual. "They said it's just the gummy bear one. You hate waiting rooms." "I want to go," I said, "because there are sentences you say without checking the weather. I was not going to let my child's heartbeat be something I heard about like a story told by a woman who can sell anything." She smiled with her whole face. "Good," she said. "Okay, good." I slept like a man with one eye open and woke before my alarm. In the shower, I tried to catalog every reason a woman I love might make choices I don't recognize. Control, shame, desperation. The belief that we were at the edge of the map and that cartographers had been wrong before. I tried to make room in my chest for compassion and leave space on the table for anger. It's not a good design. Emotions aren't stackable. Charles View smelled like lemon and paper. We sat in a waiting room that knows how to hold women in their volumes. Quiet ones praying against the noise, loud ones laughing to scare away the hush. Nora squeezed my hand with the strength that made me say yes when she asked me to marry her. "You okay?" she whispered. "Always," I said, a little too fast, because lying kindly is still lying. A sonographer named Jill led us into a dark, gentle room where the monitor glowed and the gel was warm because someone in purchasing had mercy. Nora lay back and pulled her leggings down, and my heart decided to invent a metronome. Jill turned the screen toward us and moved the wand, and there it was, a flicker that convinced me the universe is not only math. The sound, when it came, was the closest I have ever heard a miracle sound like a machine. Nora cried. I cried. I cried. Jill pointed to a pixel that was probably a limb, and we agreed it was a foot, because that is what you do when you are trying to map love onto dots. Then Jill clicked to a new screen measurements, dates. "Measuring at 6 weeks, 5 days, she said. "Any idea of your ovulation date?" Nora said, "No clue, we weren't trying, light as air." Jill typed 6-5. The computer made a little noise it makes when it agrees with biology. 6 weeks, 5 days as of today. I exhaled, then realized my breath had nowhere to go. 6 weeks, 5 days would put conception at a time when I was at a hotel in San Jose teaching a CFO why passwords shouldn't be pet-themed. I did the kindest thing I know how to do. I said nothing. I smiled. I asked Jill if we could have a printout. She printed 3 like she was giving us the whole series. Nora slid off the table, wiped gel, kissed me. "We did it," she said into my neck, her voice bright and fragile. "We're doing it," I said, because tense matters. After, in the hallway, a care coordinator handed Nora a hospital pre-registration packet. "Makes delivery easier later," she chirped. Nora tucked it in her bag. At home, while she napped, I opened the packet because I opened the mail. The top page was a fillable form with our names and a box for father's second parent. Nora had filled it at the desk in neat, black ink print, undecided partner to complete. The next page, stapled under, was a brochure about the Voluntary Acknowledgement of Parentage VAP and the 60-day rescission period. There was a sticky note in a different hand. "We can do VAP at hospital or by appointment later. No rush." My stomach did the thing where it tries to climb a rope out of your body. I closed the packet and put it under my folder because I am not a man who lets panic be in charge when paperwork asks for a pen. That night, I told Nora I had a morning meeting and wouldn't be home for coffee. She kissed me like I was a calendar and didn't ask questions. I put on the suit I wear when I need people to believe I am both kind and not to be fooled, and I walked to an address on Huntington. I had written down from Charles View's website, Office of the Medical Director. I had faxed. Now I was going to stand somewhere where someone had to give me a noun. A woman with the patient smile of people who guard doctors looked up when I said, "Hi, I have a question only an adult can answer." She asked for my name. I gave it. She asked me to wait. 10 minutes later, a man in a jacket that said director, like a threat tucked into a compliment, invited me back to a small conference room with a fake plant and a real jar of mints. "I can't discuss your wife's care," he began. "I'm not asking about her care," I said calmly. "I'm asking about your policies. Specifically, whether your clinic requires written spousal consent for donor gamete use for married patients, and whether you considered a spouse's proxy removal a trigger for additional verification. I'm also asking a human question: if a donor was used here without my knowledge or consent, what you plan to do to fix it before a baby is born into a lie." He blinked. He did not expect nouns from a man in a hospital tie. "We follow ASRM guidelines and state law," he said. "Form sure. We require spousal consent for donor use. We verify identity and require signatures." "Then you have a signature you think is mine," I said gently. "I'd like to see it, or at least I'd like to hear how you obtained it." He straightened. "If you believe fraud occurred, file a complaint with our compliance department." "I did," I said. "They faxed me a letter that said my insurance is correct and that I should ask my spouse. I am asking you because I don't want to ask my spouse a question you should be able to answer with, 'We won't hide behind her.'" We stared at each other long enough for the plant to grow. He sighed. "Mr. Klein," he said, switching to the tone clinicians use when lawsuits are sleeping in nearby rooms, "sometimes patients choose to self-pay for donor services and ask us to route communication privately. If a married patient insists she is single, we have steps, but we also have a business to run," I said, not unkind. I'm not here to make a headline. I'm here to get a live person to look at an audit log and decide whether your policy is a promise or a suggestion. He looked at the ceiling like he was counting the things he had already forgiven today. I can review the record for anomalies, he said. If I find process issues, I will contact you. He stood. I stood. We shook hands like two men pretending this was a meeting and not a confession rehearsal. I walked out into the cold with my jaw clenched and my folder heavier than it was designed to be. On the walk home, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hey Marcus," a voice said, bright West Coast casual. "This is Liam from Body Lab. I trained Nora. She asked me to drop a box by your place this afternoon. Supplements, wanted to make sure you'd be home so Ivy doesn't eat it." "We don't take deliveries," I said on habit, then processed. "Body Lab?" "Jim on Mass Ave," he said. "We've met at the holiday party?" I had not met a Liam. Nora had mentioned a trainer who understands pelvic floor. I pictured a man with kind eyes and an Instagram. "Leave it with the concierge," I said. "I'll grab it." He hung up. I Googled Body Lab and found a wall of abs and testimonials and a headshot that matched the voice. Liam, functional strength, pre-postnatal. I clicked through to his public Venmo because nobody learns, and there it was, payments from Nora with hearts and leaf emojis and a note, "Recovery blend," that made my throat dry. Another, "Storage, 22. Another, "Deposit hold." I swallowed a laugh that wasn't a laugh. That wasn't a laugh. That wasn't a laugh. The supplement box he left contained exactly what it said: magnesium, omega-3s, prenatal vitamins, and an empty space where something heavy had been removed. Under the flaps was a packing slip with his gym's address and, in faint pencil, a note, "Cryo tank goes back mon." I am not a man who makes stories out of thin air. I am a man who stacks nouns until gravity appoints itself, the narrator. That night, while Nora slept with her hand on her belly like a prayer, I sat at the kitchen table and listed everything I needed before this turned into a disaster starring a baby, get the carrier's audit of the two-factor change, pull the clinic's portal access logs, she had at some point granted me proxy. Under HIPAA, I could at least ask for a log of when my proxy was removed, request the so-called spousal consent, let them tell me no on paper, print the Venmo screen, public is fair, screenshot Body Lab and Liam, write down the San Jose dates, and find a lawyer whose eyes don't blink at words like TDI and VAP. In the morning, I called a partner at a health law firm our hospital retains for messy things, patient complaints, physician contracts. "Not asking you to represent the hospital," I said. "Personal, quiet. I need to protect myself without setting something on fire that burns a child." She gave me the name of someone who does family and med stuff without adjectives. "Carmel," she said. "She'll tell you which forms to ask for and which rooms not to enter without a witness." Carmel's office sat over a bakery that made the street smell like forgiveness. She listened without blinking, then drew a triangle on a legal pad with 3 words at the corners: truth, time, law. "We don't blow this up at the 12-week scan," she said. "We don't blow it up on Instagram. We blow it up in a conference room where the clinic has to either produce a spousal consent or admit they let a patient circumvent it. We also send a preservation letter to the Cryo bank for any donor records used with your spouse's MRN. And we prepare 2 things you are not going to like saying out loud: an affidavit of non-paternity to file if it comes to that, and a letter to the hospital birth registrar instructing them not to accept any voluntary acknowledgement of parentage signed in your name unless witnessed by counsel. This keeps you from being downstream of a lie." "I don't want to hurt her," I said, hating the sound of my voice because it made me sound like a man asking not to make decisions. "You are trying not to be erased," she said. "Those are different things." She sent the letters same day. She CC'd me on the clinic one so I could see the words "sit in black." "Please provide the following: 1. Copy of any spousal consent executed by Mr. CC. Klein authorizing the use of donor gametes. 2. Access logs for the patient portal noting removal of proxy access and enabling of confidential flags. 3. Chain of custody records for any donor specimen used or prepared. 4. Policies in effect on the date of service requiring spousal consent for donor use for married patients. She used the word spoliation because lawyers sometimes need to remind people that deleting things is a sin, even when the state is not watching. Her assistant overnighted a letter to the cryobank requesting litigation hold. Reading those words made me feel like I had brought a tank to a kitchen table, but the alternative was to stand there bare-handed while someone remade my life in a story I wasn't invited to. I decided to do one more thing before the day ended because my job has taught me that sometimes the router has the best memory in the house. I pulled the logs for our building's package room entry camera for the past 6 weeks because our concierge loves me, because people who bring cookies to the front desk live in a slightly safer world. We watched, Hannah and I, while 2 weeks earlier a courier in a blue jacket carried a small cryo tank, silver with a handle, into the room, set it down, and called. 30 minutes later, Liam from Body Lab walked in with a beanie and a backpack, signed something, and wheeled the tank out. Hannah looked at me like she had accidentally watched the wrong channel. I'll, email you the log, she said. Do you need water? I walked home with my folder hugging my ribs. Nora was at the table writing baby names in the margins of a magazine like a teenager and saying them out loud to hear which ones wanted to live. Maeve, she said, and smiled when the sound sat in the room well. Or Jonah. Jonah's cute. Jonah's cute, I said, and my voice didn't break because I am a man raised by women who know how to not let a moment bleed on the good rug. My phone buzzed. A new email from the clinic. Subject: Policy and Process. Body: Dear Mr. Klein, we have reviewed your concerns. Our policy requires spousal consent for donor use for married patients. We do not disclose whether donor services were utilized in a particular case without patient authorization. We can confirm that our process was followed. If you have further concerns, please contact our legal counsel. It ended with a name and a firm and a signature block that told me this was now a room with people who didn't laugh at parties. I forwarded it to Carmel. She called, didn't email, because some sentences shouldn't live in a subject line. They're telling you, in lawyer, that they have a piece of paper they will claim as you, she said. Which means either someone forged you, someone tricked you, or someone convinced a lazy notary to believe a man with a hat was you for 10 minutes. I will get that paper. How? I asked. Subpoena, she said, if they don't show us voluntarily. What do I do? I asked. A question I have not asked since I learned how to fix a clogged disposal without YouTube. You plan your reveal like an adult, she said, not to punish, to protect. You ask for a meeting at the clinic with their legal and compliance and the medical director. You ask Nora to come to review billing errors. You bring me, you bring your folder, you bring a copy of the Massachusetts spousal consent statute highlighted like an overachiever. And then, when they tell their story, you put the ELB and the cryobank log and the photo of Liam with the tank on the table. You do not raise your voice, you let the room hear itself. After that, we decide what to tell your families and when. Is there a version where this is not what it looks like, I asked? Because you have to give hope a seat at the table even if you intend to escort it gently out. There's a version where a clinic messed up and a nurse went rogue and your wife panicked and thought she could fix the worst decision of her life by leaning into it, Carmel said. There's not a version where your baby is yours if a donor was used. There can still be a version where you're a father in the ways that matter if you decide to be. But you don't sign a lie because you're trying to be the hero. Heroes usually end up broke and alone. I stared at the ultrasound printout on the fridge where it sat crooked under a magnet shaped like a lobster and thought of how big and small a flicker can be. In the living room, Nora hummed a song my mother sang doing dishes when I was a kid. Ivy sat at her feet like a shadow that loves better than men. I put my folder on the table and wrote a list of questions because that's what I do when I have to walk into a room where a version of the future will be picked like a door prize. What date did they collect and prepare a donor specimen? Which physician and nurse are on the chain of custody? What form do they believe I signed? How was my identity verified? Who removed my proxy access and when? Which policy allowed routing donor invoices by mail to avoid the portal? Did anyone at the clinic discuss disclosure to the resulting child with Nora? Did anyone counsel her about spousal consent? If they say I consented, what IP address signed the e-consent? I added one more line, small, under all the big ones. Ask Nora if she wants me to be the father anyway. The meeting was set for Friday at 9. The email was 5 lines, polite, as if we were discussing a refund for a wrong lamp. We look forward to resolving your concerns, their counsel wrote. Please bring any documentation you wish us to review. Nora forwarded it to me with, Do I need to be there? I hate suits. You need to be there, I replied. It's about billing. Fine, she wrote. I'll wear a dress like a grown-up. That night, in bed, she turned to me in the dark and said, I'm scared. So quietly, I had to hold the word in my hand to hear it. Me too, I said. We'll do it anyway. She put my hand on her stomach and the world became the dim outline of a person I would do anything for as long as anything didn't require me to stop being able to look a mirror in the eye. Friday morning, the conference room smelled like coffee and risk. The medical director sat at one end, legal at the other, compliance in the middle like a mediator at Thanksgiving. Carmel sat beside me, crisp, kind, terrifying in the way people are when they have decided not to be bullied by anyone wearing a badge that says, Doctor. Nora sat across, chin up, eyes bright, hands clasped on the table like the only thing she trusted in the room was her own ability to not blink first. "Let's begin," the lawyer said, folding her fingers like a prayer. "We understand there are questions about insurance." "There are questions about consent," Carmel said, smiling like it cost her nothing. "Insurance is just the napkin on the steak." The director cleared his throat. "Our policy requires spousal consent," Carmel said, sliding a highlighted sheet across the table like a dealer. "Show us his." The lawyer glanced at compliance, who glanced at a folder and pulled out a paper like a rabbit. She turned it so it faced me. There, in black and white, was my name and a signature that looked like mine if it had been taught to sign by someone who had seen it for a second once in a CVS. "Executed on March 9th, she said, "at our office." "I was in San Jose," I said quietly, "at a conference, at a hotel whose Wi-Fi smells like sadness." "We verify identity," the director said. "With what?" Carmel asked. "A wink?" "Driver's license," compliance said. "Photo, notarized." "Show me the copy," Carmel said. They did. The number under state ID differed by one digit from mine. The photo was me if you had asked Liam from Body Lab to grow a beard and make my jaw less like my father's. The notary stamp belonged to the same mobile service whose courier had once notarized a refinance for us at our kitchen table. It felt like seeing a cousin in a crowd and realizing he's a stranger. "Who scheduled this?" I asked, because sometimes the only thing left is a name. The compliance officer looked at the scheduling note on the screen. "Entered by Veronica M., RN," she read, voice smaller now. "Per patient request." Nora made a sound like a piano bench dragged across the stage. "We are not doing this," she said, and my heart broke in a way that felt like it had been waiting for instruction. "We are," I said. "We have to. Because I am not going to sign a VAP in a hospital room in 7 months and make a lie into a law." "What the hell is a VAP?" she snapped, like the life we had been living together had been paused and I had replaced the script with a glossary. "The form the hospital gives you at birth to put my name on the certificate," I said. "It makes me the legal father. It's easy to sign, it's harder to undo. I will not sign it unless I am the father, or unless the father is a choice we make together that we tell the truth about." "Mr. Klein," the lawyer said, trying to pull us back into a language with rules, "any paternity or parentage issues are better addressed with counsel. Today, we can only—" "Today," Carmel said, "you are going to tell us whether you used donor sperm to inseminate a married woman without a valid spousal consent. Then you are going to tell us how that happened, who is going to be referred to your board, and how you plan to disclose this to the patient in a way that doesn't further harm a child." Silence opened its mouth and took a seat. "Hey!" The compliance officer looked at the director. The director looked at legal. Legal looked at the page and then, for the first time, at Nora. "Ms. Klein," she said very gently, like someone telling someone that the next sentence will change the shape of their house, "did you knowingly use donor sperm?" Nora's eyes slid to me and back. "We took a break," she said. We needed a win." "And the father," legal said. "Does it matter?" Nora said, voice shaking now, real anger pushing through PR. "We're married." "It matters to the clinic because of risk," the director said. "It matters to the state because of records. It matters to your husband because he's not a prop." Her face broke then, in a way that had nothing to do with brands. "You were gone," she said to me, "small. You make everything a project. I needed—" She swallowed. "I needed this to be done. I thought if I did it and brought you the result, you would love me for being brave." "I love you," I said, because it was still true and would be true after this room, and that is why some men move to cabins to not be asked to be brave anymore. But I'm not going to become the man who lies to a child every day. "We are going to take a break," the lawyer said, and nobody argued with her because some breaks feel like mercy and others feel like the only way to keep the floor from swallowing all of us. We stood. Nora walked to the window and held her stomach like she was afraid it would fall out of the world if she didn't. I looked down at Longwood, at the traffic already angry at the day, and wondered if there was a single person in any of those cars who had planned for this morning when they packed their lunches. Carmel stood next to me and spoke so low only my bones could hear. This is the part where you decide what kind of father you're going to be, she said. Not to the idea, to the person. But we handle the clinic first. We handle the paper. Then we handle the heart. When we sat again, the director's voice had lost the casing. It came in. We are going to open an internal investigation, he said. We are going to place staff on leave. We are going to report to our accrediting body. We will not bill your insurance for any donor services. We will provide counseling referrals. You will give us the chain of custody and the notary's log, Carmel said, and you will send a letter to the cryobank preserving all records. Today. The lawyer nodded. We'll send it by 5, she said. She looked at Nora once more, and I watched something pass between women who both know what it costs to be believed in rooms like this. I am sorry, she said, and I believed she meant it. When we walked out of the clinic into the hard light of Huntington, Nora put her sunglasses on with hands that had never shaken before in public. You destroyed my life, she said without looking at me. You built it on a document I didn't sign, I said. I'm trying to keep the roof up. At home, the ultrasound photo on the fridge looked exactly the same as it had that morning. I took it down and put it in the folder because sometimes the only way to honor the future is to admit the past has to be written in ink. That night, I lay awake listening to Nora breathe on the other side of the bed and realized hope isn't a candle or an engine. It's a ledger. And now that the numbers were on paper, I could finally stop pretending they added up just because we wanted them to. The clinic sent their letter by 5, like Carmel said they would, and the moment it hit my inbox, the part of me that builds firewalls for a living stepped aside for the part that has a spine. Carmel filed preservation notices with the notary, the cryobank, and the courier service that had dropped a silver tank in my building. She CC'd the state's Board of Registration in Medicine on a complaint that read like a polite accusation. A married patient received donor services without valid spousal consent. A clinic appears to have accepted a forged ID. A staff RN scheduled and facilitated the encounter. A mobile notary stamped a signature that doesn't belong to the man whose name it carries. The next morning, the notary called Carmel first and then me. She was breathless and contrite and brand new to accountability. I remember the appointment, she said. Parking lot behind the Whole Foods. The wife did all the talking. The husband kept his hat low, said light bothered him. I asked for ID. He handed me one. I wrote the number in my journal. I stamped it. He didn't take off the hat and I didn't push it because it was cold, and her voice trailed off into a place where excuses go to die. I'm so sorry, she said, like a person who just realized a stamp is not a magic wand. I will cooperate. My insurance will cooperate. Carmel took her statement like rain. Please scan your journal. We'll need your E&O carrier's contact and your bond number, she said, efficient as mercy. After the call, she looked at me and translated, There's a human who made a lazy decision and a system that allowed it. We will fix both. Charlesview emailed us a sanitized version of an audit log. It had Mr. Klein signing an e-consent from an IP range that belonged to a co-working space in Cambridge and from a mobile device on a network registered to a prepaid carrier. The verification checkmark came from an image of a driver's license with a number off by 1 digit and a photo that could be any brown-haired man in Massachusetts with a beard and a hat and a desire to be someone else for 15 minutes. The scheduling entry was Veronica M., RN. The witnessing signature belonged to the PA I didn't know. The cryobank responded to Carmel's letter with a tight note. Shipment delivered to Charlesview on the 9th. Chain of custody forms signed by clinic staff. Donor profile number X4721. Directed donor known to patient. Screening completed according to CDC guidance. Consent file on patient chart. Directed donor known to patient. The words sat in my stomach like stones. This wasn't anonymous. It wasn't an I picked a stranger from a catalog sin. It was a person with a name she could text and a gym where he flexed professionally. We could have waited until after a baby, but waiting would only turn choices into gravity. Carmel suggested a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, NIPP. It's a cheek swab from you and maternal blood, she said. Accurate by week 10, no risk to the fetus. She has to consent. She paused. I don't think she will consent. She won't, I said. She wants a result more than she wants a record. Then we plan for a birth where you do not sign your way into a lie, Carmel said. We put the registrar on notice. We file to adjudicate parentage as soon as the baby is born. We serve the directed donor with a petition to establish paternity the minute we have a name. We didn't have a name in the file yet. We had a donor number. We had Liam's face on our package room camera wheeling out a tank like a man walking a dog. We had Venmo notes with leaves and storage. We had a gym that sells meal prep out of a side door and an owner who believes a ring light is a business plan. We needed a line between X4721 and Liam. The cryobank wasn't going to hand us that line voluntarily. But cryobanks run on logs, and men who think they are doing a kindness leave fingerprints on kindness like anyone else. The log came in the ugliest way. Hannah at the front desk called me the next afternoon, whispering like the hallways had started listening. "The courier just brought a tank," she said. "Same guy you flagged before, signed for it last month. This time, a different guy, tall, shaved head, picked it up and asked for your wife by name. He said they store it at the labs on Mass Ave." She sent me the camera still because I'm the guy who brings cookies. The shaved head belonged to a man on Body Lab's staff page. The shaved head belonged to a man on Body Lab's staff page. The label on the tank had a return address to a cryobank in Cambridge with their customer service line printed under the biohazard symbol like a joke. Carmel called the bank and used a tone that makes people look for a manager. "We are counsel for a married man whose spouse may have used your services as a directed donor without spousal consent," she said. Not quite saying Liam's name, not quite not. "We've issued a litigation hold. If any shipment was released to an address other than the licensed clinic, including a gym, preserve video logs, signatures, temperature curves, and chain of custody. We'll be requesting them." The bank's lawyer said, "Understood," in a way that means a form letter is already being drafted to their insurer. Nora seemed to pick up the shift in the air without seeing the paperwork. She stopped humming. She started cleaning, that frantic, deeply feminine cleaning that turns closets into confessions. She wiped baseboards with a fury that could have moved furniture. She made dinner with too much salt. She asked me if I wanted to feel the bloat, like we were teenagers with a secret. I put my hand on her stomach and felt nothing but warmth and thought, against my will, how beautiful a person can be when they're mid-lie and still trying to believe it's a rescue. I told my parents in a kitchen that has survived every version of truth I have ever needed to tell. My mother covered her mouth with her hand the way she did the day Ivy ate an entire chocolate bar. My father looked like he wanted to go to the clinic and personally fire someone. "We will love whatever baby this is," my mother said, as if I had asked the question out loud. "We will also love you if you leave," my father said, as if I had asked that too. They put both hands on my shoulders like they were settling me into the only seat in the world that wouldn't move under me. Nora told her mother a different version. "He's making me miserable," she said on speaker without meaning to put it on speaker. "He's turning this into a spreadsheet. He loves rules more than me." Her mother made sympathetic sounds that all mothers make when their daughters call and cry. Then her mother added the sentence that made me writhe. "He'll come around when he sees the baby. Men aren't real until the crib is assembled." I did assemble a crib because my hands needed to build something that wasn't a case file. I put it together slowly, reading each step aloud like an oath. When it stood, I sat on the floor and stared at it until Ivy put her head in my lap and sighed like the dog version of Grace. Weeks flickered. We went to the 12-week appointment together. We listened to that wild gallop and laughed like idiots because you are an idiot if you don't laugh when a person the size of your thumb is practicing life inside your wife. The OB presented the voluntary acknowledgement brochure again without any agenda in her voice. "You can sign at the hospital," she said cheerfully, "or later at Vital Records." I folded it into thirds and did not tell her I had already sent a letter to the birth registrar with my signature and Carmel's letterhead attached, instructing them that if my name appeared on a VAP without my counsel present, it would mean a forgery had graduated to farce. Carmel filed a quiet, boring motion in court. No one outside the room will ever read. A petition to adjudicate parentage upon birth, a request for the court to order genetic testing within 5 days of delivery, a motion to prevent the hospital from listing me as the father on the initial certificate without a court order. The judge set a date for 2 weeks before Nora's due date and told us to bring our documents and our comm. The clinic's internal investigation, which I expected to be a whitewash, turned out to be a gun going off inside their pristine reputation. Dr. Sood requested a meeting with us separate from legal and compliance. He sat in the same small conference room where the plant pretended to be alive and looked at us like a man who had been told how many steps led to the bottom just after he'd already fallen. "We failed," he said simply. A staff member circumvented protocol and another failed to question it. A notary stamped a lie. We have terminated 2 employees. We are self-reporting to the American Society for Reproductive Medicine and the state. Our cryobank privileges are under review. We will cover all legal fees arising from our process failure." He paused. "This never should have happened. To you, to anyone." Nora didn't speak. I said thank you because my mother raised me that way, and because gratitude costs nothing even when it doesn't buy what you need. Then I asked for the donor identity. He shook his head. Directed donor identities are protected by patient confidentiality. We can only release with the patient's authorization or a court order. I didn't look at Nora because I knew she was already planning her refusal. "Then we'll see you at the motion hearing," Carmel said, standing up like the end credits had rolled. Body Lab took Liam off their website the same week their Yelp filled with one-star reviews that smelled like my friends. I didn't ask anyone to do that. People see a tank and their morality wakes up hungry. The gym issued a bland statement about employment decisions and client privacy and commitment to the community. I drove by one afternoon and saw Liam sweeping in the lobby and thought, not for the first time, how men who make small choices to feel huge end up small in rooms where their name used to open doors, At 20 weeks, the anatomy scan measured fingers and kidneys and a spine like a tiny ladder. I had to leave the room twice to keep from crying loud enough to scare someone. The tech printed more pictures. Nora slid them into her wallet like credit cards. On the ride home, she said, almost to herself, "I want her to have your eyes." And then she bit her lip and stared out the window like she could turn landscapes into second chances. We told our families the truth in painful increments. My sister called it a con with diapers, then caught herself and apologized for saying the quiet part loud. Nora's father sent me a terse email that might as well have been a legal memo. "Marriage is a covenant. You should stand by your wife and adopt the child." I didn't reply. I don't argue with men whose rings make them brave in letters. Carmel asked the court for a pre-birth order for testing. Liam's attorney finally appeared, as if conjured by the word subpoena. He tried to delay, citing privacy and reputational harm. Carmel wrote a brief in an afternoon and ate the delay for breakfast. "My client is not a wallet," she wrote. "He is a person. He will not be conscripted by a clinic's malpractice into forever lying to a child." The judge, who wore reading glasses like they were offended by foolishness, signed the order, genetic testing within 5 days postpartum for mother, child, and alleged directed donor. Nora stopped speaking to me the week before the court date. She moved into the guest room without theatrics. Ivy slept on the floor halfway between us like she had been appointed to split the difference. I made casseroles and froze them because feeding the future felt like a job a man could do without lying. I packed a hospital bag that included a copy of the court order, 2 pens, and a toothbrush. The hearing was quick. The judge asked 3 questions that required nouns. Were we married at conception? Did the clinic use a donor? And was there a valid spousal consent? The answers were yes, probably, and no. The court order for testing renewed with the ink still wet. Nora's lawyer asked whether the court could forbid me from publishing details that might harm his client. The judge looked at me and said, "Sir, can you refrain from performing this online?" And I said, "I have refrained from performing since the day I faxed a form." And he nodded like that was the answer he needed for his soul. When Nora went into labor, she texted me one line, "It's time." I drove like a sober man to the hospital we both work in and found the floor where tenderness and pain have learned to share the same hallway. Nora refused my hand and took a nurse's instead. I stood at her shoulder and breathed the way a man breathes when he is watching both his life and his plan unfold at the same time. The labor ran 12 hours. It felt like 12 days. She pushed and screamed, and I did the thing men do that is part ritual and part apology, you murmur. "You've got this," in a voice you hope sounds more like a promise than a bargain. Our daughter arrived with a sound that made the architecture of the room stranger and kinder. She was red and offended and perfect. My heart did that stupid exploding, and then, because paper is my religion now, I handed the registrar a copy of the court order while my hands were still shaking. "No VAP today," I said. "Court-ordered testing. We'll get you names later." She nodded like she'd been waiting to be asked to be a grown-up all week. The swabs went into labeled envelopes under a nurse's impassive eyes. Liam refused to appear in person. He submitted to a cheek swab at a hospital across the river under order. The lab turned their machines the way good labs do when court orders are stapled to samples. 3 days later, Carmel forwarded the email with the subject line that would end one version of my life and begin a different one. Probability of paternity, no bot ... Probability of paternity, 99.9 ... I stared at those numbers until the decimal points grew tired. Then I set the phone down and looked at my daughter asleep in the bassinet in my living room, hands curled like she had memorized the shape of forgiveness. The truth didn't change her weight. It changed my job. Carmel filed our divorce the week after the results. Massachusetts still believes in the presumption that a husband is a father until the court says otherwise. The court said otherwise in 6 pages. I was declared not the legal father. The order established Liam as father and set child support based on his cheerful Instagram income and the very uncheerful reality of a court's ability to turn emojis into arithmetic. Nora moved into a 1-bedroom in Cambridge with good light and awful parking. The clinic's insurer wrote checks with too many zeros to cover our legal fees and to settle an emotional distress, claimed they had no appetite to litigate in a world that reads headlines about consent breaches like they're recipes for rage. Veronica, the RN who scheduled the appointment, lost her job and her license is under review. The PA resigned. The clinic now requires an in-person spousal verification with photo, 2 non-expired IDs, and a selfie with a date stamp on a whiteboard like a kidnapped person who knows how to bring humor to a crisis. They started mailing brochures to spouses whether patients want them mailed or not. Too late for us, just on time for someone else. The notary's bond paid our fees with a letter that said no admission of wrongdoing, while admitting everything in the language only insurance lawyers speak. The mobile service updated their training from "don't notarize in parking lots" to "make people remove hats." It would be slapstick if it didn't feel like stitches. Liam posted a story with a black screen and the words, "Fathers aren't sperm donors," and then took it down when his lawyer called. He pays child support now. He complains to friends about family court like it's a planet with a mean sun. He sees the baby Wednesday evenings and every other Sunday for now. He brings tiny sneakers and devours the attention of baristas who think men with babies invented love. Maybe he'll grow into the job, maybe he won't. That's not my problem anymore. Nora asked to meet at a cafe near Central Square 2 months after the birth. She wore exhaustion like a coat. She didn't start with defense. She started with a sentence I didn't know I still needed to hear. "I did this," she said. "I made a choice and then I kept choosing it because I thought if I stopped, everything would crash. I told myself I was saving us. I wasn't." "I know," I said. "It wasn't absolution. It was a ledger balancing out finally." "I want you in her life," she said, tentative, like she was offering me a fragile heirloom. "Not as a legal father, as, God, I hate the word uncle, as Marcus, as the person who can fix a garbage disposal without YouTube and make the world boring in the exact way a kid needs. I don't want to raise her in a home where the first story she learns is that lies hold houses up. I want you around so she knows what it looks like when a man doesn't fall apart just because he's right." I looked at the photo of our daughter on her phone, cheeks like a promise. "I'll be around," I said. "I'll be boring. I'll be the guy who shows up with math homework and the right drill bit." I paused. "But we don't pretend. She gets a true story when she asks. Age appropriate, but true." Nora nodded and cried and laughed and did the face I fell in love with when she told a barista once, years ago, "Actually, can I change my order?" and then apologized to the universe and herself at once. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me a villain in every sentence just because I earned it in some." That's the part of the story where the internet wants fireworks or hand-holding or a TikTok of a modern family dancing on a patio. We got none of those. We got a schedule. We got a Google Calendar called Jelly Bean, where I am invited to doctor's appointments as Marcus. And sometimes I sit in the lobby, and sometimes I go in, and sometimes I pick up diapers like a man running a very strange errand. We got a Friday night in July where I sat on the floor of Nora's apartment while the baby fell asleep on my chest, and the Red Sox lost, and nobody lied to anyone about anything for 3 consecutive hours. It was the best time I've had in years. People ask for the moral. You can hear the hunger in their voices. They want to know what to do if their life starts smelling like ours. I don't have one moral. I have a handful of sentences that kept me from burning everything down. Paper is a kindness. The truth is, not a bat. Babies deserve names unhooked from lies, and every system is a person's choice repeated until it feels like the weather. I chose to be dull where I could have been dramatic. I chose to let a judge tell the room what kind of father I am. I chose to not call a woman I loved once a monster in public, to try to even a score. The world was already evening without me. What would you have done? Would you have signed the VAP and raised a child who wasn't yours because love felt louder than the ledger? Would you have blasted the clinic online or quietly collected nouns until legal letters did what rage couldn't? Would you have forgiven and tried to rebuild inside a marriage where the plumbing is now lies? Or would you have done what I did, refuse the lie, keep your heart open for the person, and learn to be an adult who shows up at daycare with a drill for the cubby that doesn't line up? If this kept you listening, drop your take in the comments. Tell me how you would have walked out of that conference room, or if you'd have flipped the table and dared the cameras to make you a villain. Hit like so. This finds the next person who just found a donor brochure in their mailbox with their address on it and a feeling they can't name. And subscribe if you want more long, messy, true-feeling stories where the twist isn't a chair-throwing showdown, it's a forged consent, a cryo tank in a package room, and a man who learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do for a baby is to refuse to sign a beautiful lie.